Hi, this is Ben Rogers. This is Options Profit Max, and this is just another property options tip I thought I'd share with you today. This was spurred on from a conversation I had in the car this morning on the way to the office. A buddy of mine called Tony. Tony, you know who you are. He called me up and said, look, I've got this problem. I'm getting lots of people calling me and I'm getting lots of opportunities, property opportunities in this same sort of scenario. Can you help? Very simply, this is where somebody's in negative equity and he feels that either an option or instalment contract he can take the property on and somehow help these people out. So I just use the example that he gave me this morning. If you can see my board here. Do you know what it is yet? Okay, so there's a house. This house that Tony was talking to me about this morning is worth about £95,000. Now the challenge is that the owner has a debt on it of £115,000. So what does the owner do? Well, the owner hasn't got a huge amount of opportunity to do anything on this. They want rid of the property, but who's going to buy it? You know, it's a negative equity, it's £20,000 upside down. So what does Tony do about this? At the moment, apparently this mortgage here is costing at about £400 a month, and he was saying that the market rent on that property is about £600 a month. Okay, so there's your mortgage, there's your market rent. So even if you just take it on a basic option and keep the property, you know, it'd still be £200 in positive cash flow. You would need to think about things like buildings insurance, etc. But you know, on a very basic level. And then all you'd need to do is wait for this amount to go up in value above what the mortgage is worth, and then he's kind of back into a kind of positive area again. Now, let's just get rid of all of that. The property itself has still got 18 years left to run on the mortgage. All right, so it's kind of got 18 years that he could play with this. And remember, the owners just want rid of the property because at the moment, you know, it's in negative equity. I don't actually know the reason why they're moving on, but that's their kind of the financials over why they can't sell it at the moment. Remember, you're not looking for people who are financially challenged. You're looking for people who are motivated to move on and just trying to solve their problems. They may have wanted to emigrate, they may have wanted to move for work, they may be going to, who knows why they're moving, but the thing that's stopping them is that property that's got a lot more debt against it than the property is actually worth. So how does Tony work with this? Well, basically what I said with Tony is that what he needs to do is he needs to, well, there's two questions. Does he want positive cash flow, or does he want the long-term profit of this property? So he's got to ask himself those two questions to start off with. Because if he wants the cash flow, maybe what he would do is he would take the property on an option or the exchange of the delayed completion or an instalment contract and just keep it long-term and take the difference between what he's paying on the mortgage, which remember was £400, and whatever he's either going to pay on the rent, which could be £600, or maybe if he was to put a tenant buyer in there, he might get that to £800 or £850 a month. So he could just take the cash flow, which here with the tenant buyer is £450. Okay, so that's not to be sniffed at. He could do that. And he could put a tenant buyer in there buying the property, but he's still got the problem. It's only worth 95 today. It's 115 is what is outstanding on it. So if he was going for the second option, which is the long-term cash flow, then what he might want to do is actually overpay the mortgage. So what does that actually mean? Well, mortgages, and look, I'm no financial advisor, I'm not an IFA, I'm not a mortgage broker, I can't give you the ins and outs of how the mortgages are going to work. I can only go based on my experience of it and my understanding of it. If you are paying a mortgage, even if it's interest only, if you make overpayments, which is kind of a little bit like a repayment mortgage, guess what? The actual value of the outstanding balance goes down. So let's just look at this. So this is the amount and this is the time, and let's say, I don't know, this is 10 years, this is, you know, today. Let's say the value of the mortgage we know at the moment is £115,000. Okay, This is on an interest only basis. If you didn't overpay anything, it's an interest only, gets to 10 years, and guess what? There's still £115,000 outstanding. Now, if that was on a repayment mortgage, of course, gradually what happens is that you make payments and you make interest payments, and gradually that goes down. Now, look, I'm just basing this on, you know, an example so you can see these aren't exact figures, but you can see that over time, you know, get down to 10 years and maybe there's, let's say there's £70,000 outstanding. Now, the whole idea with overpaying a mortgage with a property that you take on board as a lease option or an instalment contract is that you're driving down the mortgage so there's more profit in it for you long term. The beauty of this though is, let's say, well, let's have a different coloured pen here. Let's say that the mortgage is 400 and we already know that he could say maybe receive 850 on a tenant buyer. If he was to take just say £300 of this and pay it off the mortgage each month, it's going to make a massive difference to what's outstanding. Let's just do the very, very quick maths. Very quick maths. £300 overpayment each month times by 12 months is, my quick maths is £3,600 a year overpayment. Let's say we times that by 10 years, well that's £36,000 that's been paid off. But is it? It's a lot more than £36,000 because here's the logic. We know that to start off with there was, back to the blue pen, I hope this makes sense, you can look back over this video. There's £115,000 outstanding on the mortgage. The mortgage we said was £400. So after the first month, there's not £115,000 outstanding because he's going to overpay by 300, he's going to pay £700 a month. So there's actually £114,700 outstanding. Now this is where it gets interesting, because basically on this sum of money, that's what the interest is applied to. The interest on £114,700 is less than the interest on £115,000. And this is where we come back to this bell curve. Okay, remember our initial look here. We had £115,000 up here, we had this say over 10 years. Now instead of it going the straight line along there because you're only paying the interest only amount, by overpaying you bring the payment down. Now this is where it gets interesting, because this is where, if you're not going the cash flow route and you're looking to use the cash flow to overpay the mortgage, this is where you can bring the price down. We know that the property was mortgage on it was 115, but we know the value right now is only £95,000. So the beauty here is that what Tony could actually do is he could sell the property for what it's worth today at 95, even though he's buying it for 115. Because if he uses the cash flow on it to overpay the mortgage every single month, and again, you need to play around this, guys. You need to go online, you need to get some amortization tables. You can get them free online, you may have to pay to get them online, but a very, very good tool for you. That's amortization table. Because that then allows you to play around and put the overpayment figures in versus the size of the mortgage and the time that you're going to have it over. All right? So, is it possible? Mortgage today of 115, value today of 95. If he makes overpayments of 3,000, what did you say, 3,600 3,600 a year, £300 a month, over 10 years is £36,000. Well, 36,000 off the 115, I can't really do a maths, but that takes it down to 84, is that right, 84? So it takes it down to 84, quick maths, 80, yes, £84,000 at a £36,000 overpayment. Which then, of course, he's in credit by, you know, he's going to make £11,000. But we know he's not just going to make £11,000, because if he's paid off £36,000, what's happened is there's been a lot less interest to be paid every single month, because the interest goes down because the balance outstanding is down. So it'll actually be a lot more than £36,000 is overpaid. I know that's quite an interesting concept, and it took me blooming ages to get it in my head the first time round, but it's just how I could help Tony this morning by explaining how he could make these deals work for him. His personal attitude is he doesn't want the cash flow right now. He's interested in the long-term benefit of the property. And his then question was, well, do I go in an option contract, do I go in an instalment contract? To be honest, guys, it doesn't really matter, so long as you make sure that your solicitors put that contract together based on what you and what the seller and what your buyer is going to do. Now, the other thing to take into account, and this is quite interesting, let's say that Tony was going to put into that property I'm using a generic term, tenant buyer. It might actually be a buyer if they're buying on an instalment contract. There tends to be a kind of a, go back to this sort of curve here, this 115, interest only actually versus the overpayment of the cash flow. There tends to be, you need to play with this on your amortisation figures, there tends to be a sweet spot at about 7 years. So what I suggested that Tony should do is that any buyer or tenant buyer that he puts in there, he needs to make sure he's going to make his money. Because he could sell it at today's price at 95, even though it owes him 115 that he's buying it for. So he needs to make sure that he doesn't lose his profit in the deal. So could he do, well, let me ask you the question, do mortgage companies put things in called redemption penalties? At the start of a mortgage, they put a redemption penalty in, because that means that if somebody pays off their mortgage early, the mortgage company's still going to make their money. Now, why do you think they do that? Because they're lending money to make money. Is it true that you should maybe be thinking like a mortgage company does? Should you have a redemption penalty in there, say, for those first 7 years? Now, maybe, and you work your profit out, and I'm just going to chuck figures, this isn't exact maths that I'm using here, just an example. Let's say your redemption penalty might be, in year one, it could be £8,000. And that gradually goes down, so by the time we get to year 7, it's maybe, or 6, it's only sort of £2,000, and then by the time we get to year 7, it's nothing. All right? So what you've done is you've protected your profit within the deal. So even if somebody wants to buy it early, they can. That's no problem at all. If they can get a mortgage, if they want to buy it right now, they can. They just need to do as they would normally do with a mortgage company, pay a redemption penalty. But what you then can do is you don't want to be living with these guys in a financial relationship until you retire. You want them then to actually move away from you and actually start using a normal high street mortgage company. So that's what you do, is then you maybe start playing around with the interest rate. Could you then, at year 7, could you start increasing the interest rate so you're in effect penalising them for staying with you? What you're actually doing is you're motivating them to move on from you so that you can get all your profit out of here. Because you're going to get the majority of your profit, in Tony's example, when he sells the house. So that's where you start putting the interest rate up, and remember, speak to your solicitor, explain what you're trying to do. They can then put the framework and the legals around this. You just need to know what you want to do and understand the strategy of how you solve somebody's problem because they can't sell a negative equity property, and you solve somebody else's problem where they can't buy a property right now because they can't get a mortgage, they haven't got a big enough deposit. All right? So that's how you do it. Negative equity, take the problem away from somebody who's got that challenge, create a bunch of profit within the property. You need to ask yourself the question, are you going for cash flow right now? If so, keep the cash flow, don't worry about the long term. Or are you taking the long term view, which is you want to get long term profit out of it and you're going to overpay with the cash flow that you've got? So there you go. My name's Ben Rogers. I hope you found that tip today very helpful. Massive thanks to Tony, who's actually given me the idea for doing this video this morning. I actually put, well, yeah, I think this is a great way of doing things. It's a great way of you helping people, and I hope you found that helpful. My name's Ben Rogers. This is Options Profit Max. I'd love to hear from you with any problems that you've got, because I'm sure we can help you as well. Take care.